Every day I walk through Harvard Yard several times, and much of my workday is in this office, in the old attic of Seaver Hall, and from my windows I can see out across the Seaver Quadrangle to the Fogg Art Museum under reconstruction, and I can see as far east as the Mystic River Bridge and the Schraff's Candy Factory. It's a long view and a good view, but the part of it I like best is diagonally downward into the quadrangle. And most of the time, when I walk through the yard, I look around looking for something new, because every time I do that, I find something new. The yard is a rich visual environment, and it rewards scrutiny. Always, it rewards scrutiny. And Seaver is extremely important in the experience of an awful lot of extension school students. And I've taught an extension for 35 years, and I've had an office all that time in Seaver, so we're going to deal with Seaver. Seaver has a very rich facade, but it also has mysteries. My favorite mystery is under these three windows. Before the handicapped accessible entrance was built, the shrubbery came right up against Seaver, and painted under those windows in capital letters, and you can see this only at daybreak in December on a sunny day, are the words Kent State 4 dead, and the 4 has been X'd out with a 7 put over it. This graffito went on Seaver in 1970, and despite the university's best efforts, it is still viewable, as you can see in the attached copyrighted photograph I made using a film camera and then had digitized, and you can see it if the light is perfect. In a way, it's what Ursula K. Le Guin says, that sometimes fantasy is the fall of light on a place. What's on the west facade of Seaver Hall is a high-tech device from the 1880s. It's a hydraulic fire bell. When the sprinkler system inside the building activates, water moves through it and extinguishes the fire. But as it moves through the sprinkler heads, it activates a valve in this device which rings the bell hydraulically by the pulse of water. And if you look closely at the device, you'll see there's a slight stain that comes down the brick. That's because the water that rings the bell exits from the bottom of the shroud and runs down the side of the building and lands on the walk. I have seen this bell in action just once. It really works, and it works when water inside flows. It is not electric. It's purely mechanical. This arch is one of many acoustical anomalies in the yard and elsewhere at Harvard. If one faces in here and whispers, one's whisper is transmitted right around the arch to whoever stands there and listens. I talk about this to the children of tourists, because the children of tourists often aren't very interested in seeing Harvard at all, and they're usually well behaved but bored. So when I find them around here, I put them in face into the thing and into the arch and have them talk to each other. On the other hand, if one is sitting here whispering or talking on one's cell phone, the person sitting over there can hear the entire conversation. I don't tell many people about that. Now, in the middle of the traffic jam, which happens to be here today for some reason unknown to me, okay, behind me is the statue of John Harvard. If you swing the cameras around now and look at the view at what John Harvard looks at, John Harvard stares at the side of a statue of Sumner, a statue that was designed by Anne Whitney, a little known but extremely influential Boston sculptor. Unlike John Harvard, Sumner sits facing south with a book on his lap. I think it's an indication that he is trying to find the answer to Calhoun, okay, who had all of the logical basis for why states' rights and especially secession from the Union was legal. This is the Dexter Gate, okay, given in memory of Samuel Dexter of the class of 1890. The key here is not only what it says up high, Veritas, okay, which one sees everywhere if one looks for it in the yard, but the inscription, enter to grow in wisdom. This is reasonably, as far as I can learn, well recognized by certainly students, but also tourists, because they get a good long view of it, especially when they walk out of the Harvard bookstore. They see this, enter to grow in wisdom. By definition, that says not learning or knowledge, wisdom. Okay? But if one comes inside the gate, okay, It's much more difficult to see the inscription here, because when this was built, it deflects the eye down straight into what is now Harvard Bookstore's main windows. But up here, one can read, "Depart to serve better thy country and thy kind." Okay? This is a very interesting inscription. Serving one's country, I think most of us understand. But what does it mean, thy kind? To serve better what? All humankind? Maybe. But maybe kind could mean educated people, not others. I don't know. But it's worth thinking about, but one will never think about it if one doesn't see the inscription to start with. When one's in the tunnel, the world is quiet, and behind us is the world of scholarship and contemplation. Out there is the world of busyness, not just business, but busyness. Lots of noise, lots of motion, lots of color, a kind of visual jangle, a concatenation of confusion. Okay? It's very easy to walk through this liminal zone too quickly and not be prepared for what one is walking from, let alone not be prepared for what one is walking into. What's important here, perhaps, is that this part of the yard is artificially elevated. It is the top of the Pusey Library. One can see some indication of the depth of the library by simply leaning over the railing and looking down into the atrium, which has a full-grown maple tree in it. But one can also ponder a little bit our understanding of how libraries have changed really up until about 1980. When one looks at the Houghton Library, filled with rare books and manuscripts, it has an appearance about it of a kind of solidity and solemn splendor. This library gives a totally different impression. I'm not too sure how to describe it, but it is almost as though it's a kind of sophisticated underground storage facility. Not exactly what most of us think of. When one thinks of a library, one thinks, I think, that it's an above-ground building, not underground. Things that go underground are either secret, like the strange archive in the last seconds of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, or something that has to be preserved in coolness or whatever. But if we turn this way, we see another example of a library, which because of the lighting in the yard is almost invariably a building with mirrored windows. Usually, except at night of course, one cannot see into Lamont. It's almost as though Lamont is rejecting casual observation, casual inquiry, even though it's one of the more public libraries at Harvard, since it's a repository of U.S. government documents and the general public can enter with permission. But this is the kind of place that one can stand and think about simply the meaning of the word library as building. Okay? For many Harvard students, church means memorial church, even though church in the end means a group of people with a divine mission. A library in the end is a collection of books. But nowadays we tend to think of a library, the word itself, as designating a building. And right here you can see three different eras and three different ideas about what that building might be. Here's another manhole cover. Notice that they are not person covers or anything else. They are still very sexist in their name. But this one is simply labeled Storm. Now, one could argue, if one was speaking to a 6-year-old who could read, that one opens that up and out comes a storm. But what actually this is part of the storm drainage system that surrounds Pusey Library, which is set very deep into the shallow water table that I've already mentioned, and as I understand is continuously pumped because it always has a drainage problem in the sub-basement which is intended to have it. It also has a diesel-powered pump which is to be activated in hurricanes in order to keep the water out of the building. But this is the kind of detail that is rather intriguing, and if one was learning English or was from another country, one must ask occasionally, what does that mean? Storm, down below. One of the things one notices when one stands in front of University Hall looking across essentially towards Seaver is the different ages of the trees now. There are still old trees. But anyway, these trees are not going to live forever, but when they are taken down, hopefully simply not falling down, but taken down, there'll be young trees, which you can see have been extraordinarily precisely planted, which by then will take their place. I mean, this is a very carefully managed space, and it actually works extremely well because when you look out at it, it looks like everything is just perfect. Well, it is, but it's perfect by design.